Good morning. Call to order and roll call. The Audit Committee is in session.
Chair Seaman?
Here.
Vice Chair Price?
Here.
Member Gahn?
Here.
Councilman Alpensky?
Present.
Member Kircher?
Here.
Thank you, Chair. You have a quorum.
Okay, agenda item number 2. Are we in compliance with the open meeting law?
Yes, we are, Chair.
Thank you. So agenda item number 3, public comment. Comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. If you wish to be heard, come forward and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion as well as the amount of time any single speaker is allowed may be limited. Is there anyone wishing to be heard? Seeing none, I'll close public comment portion and we'll move on to item number 4. Item number 4, for possible action to approve the final minutes by reference of the regular meeting of July 8, 2024. Is there a motion for approval?
Motion to approve?
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Please post. The motion carries. Agenda item number 5, discussion for possible action on Audit Oversight Committee quarterly meeting dates for calendar year 2025. The following dates have been proposed for holding the quarterly Audit Committee meetings in 2025. January 6, 2025, April 7th, 2025, Monday, July 21st, 2025, and October 6, 2025. The Monday, July 21st will be held at 11. All other meetings will be held at 10. Okay, is there a motion?
Motion to approve the dates?
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Please post. Motion carries. Agenda item number 6, report by staff regarding city's new fraud, waste, and abuse hotline. Brian Smith, acting city auditor, will give this report. Please begin, Mr. Smith.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. Good to be with you this morning. I'm happy to share with you some of the details of the city's new fraud, waste, and abuse hotline. The city's past fraud reporting process, according to the city's fraud policy and procedure, was for employees or citizens to report fraud to our city marshal's office, and also for the progress and results of their investigations to be reviewed by a fraud committee that's comprised of the city manager, city attorney, and the city auditor. According to a recent survey of various organizations, in fact, there were various organizations, they looked at 1,900 fraud cases. And as a part of that survey, they found that the most frequent way that fraud is identified is through tips. And you'll see on this chart, 43% of the time, those tips are identified, or it's through tips that fraud is identified. The next item there is internal audit, 14% of the time. And then you see the other ways that fraud is identified. This shows how important it is that there be a good fraud reporting mechanism in place for employees and citizens to report fraud, waste, and abuse. Many cities around the country offer a fraud hotline to employees and citizens. Here are just some examples in the Western U.S. Of cities with fraud hotlines. And you'll see our neighbors, Henderson, and to the north, Carson City, have fraud hotlines. Recognizing the need to improve the city's fraud reporting process, and in collaboration between our office, the city manager's office, and the city attorney's office, the city has purchased and implemented a fraud hotline known as Ethics Point that's provided by a company known as Navex. We believe this will be a valuable tool for encouraging employees and citizens to report fraud, waste, and abuse that they may encounter in working with or for the city. This hotline, we're proud to report that it went live just 2 weeks ago. And today I'd like to just give you a brief demo of what this fraud hotline looks like. And Joe's going to come up here and help us walk through it. So you will notice on the city's website that there are multiple areas on the city's intranet and internet where there's the link to the fraud hotline. For example, at the very bottom here under city information, it says report fraud. There we go, the very bottom, right there. There we go. So this is the city's website. This gives a little introduction to somebody that might be wanting to report fraud. Just some minimal information, gives some examples of types of fraud, waste, and abuse. And then they can click on this link here, and this takes them outside of the city's website to the third-party provider, as I mentioned, NavX. This website has been customized to a certain extent for us. So you'll see here, it talks a little bit about the city's commitment to maintaining highest standards of integrity. It goes through definitions of fraud, waste, and abuse, and gives the user some ideas of the things that they'll want to report in their tip. It also, at the very top, it alerts the user that this is not to be used, it's not a substitute for HR matters, and it gives the HR phone number there. Also, this website is translated into Spanish and Tagalog. And you can see that up at the top there. So if I'm suspecting fraud at the city, I have a few options. I can call, and there'll be a live operator that'll take the report, or I can make a report online. And so here, Joe has just clicked the Make a Report Online, and then it takes the user to a listing of various types of fraud, waste, and abuse. And the user can click on details and get a definition of those types of fraud, waste, and abuse. So if I suspect that there's been a theft, so we'll scroll down to theft of cash or city property. So a little definition, and then I click there, and then this takes us further into the reporting page. And it's on this page that the user is able to document what they know about the suspected fraud, waste, or abuse. They can remain anonymous. They can select that. If they remain anonymous, the email that they provide will not be provided to the city. It'll be retained with NavX. And also, if they remain anonymous, they will receive a confirmation email after they make the report that'll have a key or a code that they'll be able to revisit the site to get a status update on their report. And they'll also be asked to provide or to add a personal password. So let's see. So we see some of these questions that will be asked to them. You know, where did this happen? When did this happen? Who was involved? And how long has it been going on? And there's a big field there for giving all the details. And they can also attach supporting documents too. So that is the front end of the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline. And as I mentioned, the focus of this hotline is just fraud, waste, and abuse, not HR matters, not general ethics matters, but it is focused on fraud, waste, and abuse. Now, inevitably, there may be employees that try and use this website to report those things, but those will be evaluated and sent to the appropriate parties for investigation. So if we go back to the regular PowerPoints, thank you, Joe. Oh, and if you can go back to just the previous slide. So this is a draft of a poster that may be distributed around the city. You'll notice that there's a QR code there too. And that QR code can be used to report the fraud on the mobile app that has the similar information. So let's see, once the fraud report is made, there is an email that's sent to the 3 members of the fraud committee. So once again, the city auditor, city attorney, city manager. They receive that email at the same time. It alerts them the report has been made and encourages them to go into the system and review the report. At that point, these 3 members evaluate the report and together decide how to proceed. So a decision will need to be made on who should be involved in that investigation. Now, like I mentioned, cases that do not involve fraud, waste, and abuse, they'll be assigned to the appropriate department, for example, HR. And then, following the investigation, the results of the investigation will be documented within the Ethics Point software, and then we'll be able to summarize the cases that have been reported throughout the year. And so what is the city auditor's involvement? Just a summary. So the city auditor is an independent member of the fraud committee. And the fraud committee meets monthly at a minimum. Now there may be cases where that fraud committee, if there's a report made, they may need to get together more frequently. So the committee is, let's see. So we'll be, as a part of the committee, we'll be reviewing fraud cases. Let's see, I'm sorry. Our office may be involved with leading some of the investigations. For example, non-criminal matters such as waste and abuse that don't arise to the level of criminality. And we also, in the past, we have been a support to, for example, the city marshal's office in investigations. And as an office with every fraud case, we will be evaluating that case and determining what went wrong, what internal controls failed, and we will be reporting on that and providing recommendations to improve those internal controls. Also, as I mentioned, the system is going to allow us to provide a summary of hotline activity. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see an example from, well, we're still going to be designing what our summaries are going to look like. Here's an example from the city of Long Beach, where they've identified what the actions that were taken on the fraud cases that were reported over the year. So some of them, they conducted an investigation, some were referred to a department, some were referred to an outside agency, and some, there just wasn't enough evidence available or information to take any action. Another example from the city of Long Beach is, they had over the year 51 cases that were reported, 30 that weren't in the purview of the hotline related possibly to other agencies. And then out of those 51, there were 7 that were substantiated, or founded, as they say. So we look forward to creating those reports, and we'll be able to bring those to this committee to share with you the activities of the fraud hotline.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Before I ask the committee if they have any questions, we went through that website so quickly. Is it clear on there where they see that their email will not be forwarded if they want to stay anonymous?
It is. There's a good message within that reporting page that says,
kind of stands out.
If you remain anonymous, here's what's going to happen.
Okay.
And it talks about NAVEX not holding on to their personal, or not sharing their email with the city of Las Vegas.
I'm surprised that a city of our size has followed Henderson and Carson City. Does the committee have any questions? Okay, Council.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Smith. This is definitely long overdue, and I'm very excited that we're bringing this to the entire city. I wanted to ask, how much is the cost?
So the cost, we have entered into a 1-year contract, and it's around $11,000, which really is pretty reasonable. There are some limitations on that amount. That essentially gives us a package of 50 calls. So that's the way they do have their pricing structure. And so if we were getting close to that 50, they would alert us, and there would be additional charges beyond that 50.
When you say 50, that means 50 people reporting something, anything?
That's right. That's right.
And we've been up for, you said, 4 or 5 days?
What was that?
How long has this been active?
Just 2 weeks.
2 weeks? Do we
Yes.
have anything to report in 2 weeks?
Oh, we do. We were excited to see the first report on the fraud hotline. Unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, it was a citizen that I think they were mistaken, thinking it was that they were reporting possibly to the police department. And it had to do, well, I guess I need to be careful about what I share since this is a confidential. I will just leave it at that it was unrelated to the city itself and a fraud. So we were able to close it out very quickly. We did actually reach out to this individual and help them understand the actions they needed to take to address the situation that they had reported.
It had to do with Metro. Do we forward it to Metro, or it?
We did not
circumstances?
forward it,
Okay.
but we encouraged her to reach out
Okay.
to Metro.
Last touch, I like the poster that you generated, or perhaps the company generated. You're going to circulate that, because having this fraud hotline is one thing. Ensuring that all 3,700 of our employees understand that it's here and available to them is another. So we're going to
Yes.
move those. Are you going to have them all printed in the print shop? Are you going to take them and do you need help?
Hand them out personally. Yeah. This is something that we need to discuss, is how to publicize this. We do have a fraud committee meeting this Thursday, and that's going to be one of the agenda items. And so we're going to want the buy-in from Mike Jansen on how to appropriately roll this out. All the links, there's lots of links out there on the city's website, but it's only going to be as successful as we publicize it to the public and citizen and employees.
Thank you.
So when you say 50 calls, is that including people who reported on the website? Or does that mean just the hotline?
My understanding is it's based on any report.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, you could have somebody that could try and misuse the website. Our understanding is that they would take that into consideration. So if there was a group that just decided to swamp the hotline with just frivolous
Right.
reports, they would take that into consideration.
Well, I wonder if they have any programs for unlimited, I mean, we'll get to that point. Right now, it's fairly new,
Yeah,
and
and
we'll
that's
see
why
how it
we
goes.
just entered into a year contract, just so we can see how this works out and get a better feel for what the activity is going to be.
Okay.
And it's a new program. As the audit committee meets and establishes, not the audit committee, but the fraud committee, meets and establishes procedures around it, now that we're asking people to call in and name fraud or waste, we want to ensure that we have proper policies to follow up, because the worst thing that could happen from a liability standpoint would be people begin to report fraud, but then we don't see it followed up effectively in a certain amount of time, within a certain amount of care. So when we ask for that and we get it, now we're obligated to act on it very effectively and quickly, well, quickly as it is necessary, because we'll open ourselves up to more liability for asking the question but then not properly following up. So just to ensure that the fraud committee's processes account for, we asked for this information, now we got to make sure we do something with it. Anything that's unaddressed or findings that haven't been resolved could lead to a potential problem if not addressed accurately. So thank you, sounds wonderful.
Thank you, Committee Member Price. One thing that we need to do as a fraud committee is we need to update the city's fraud policy and procedure. And so that's going to be a next step. One thing to keep in mind, though, with this fraud hotline, we aren't changing, this is just a tool for reporting. We aren't changing how public safety does their investigations. We aren't changing how HR does their investigations. But it's going to be incumbent on the fraud committee to get these reports out to who needs to see them timely. And so I believe that's the beauty of it. It'll be, that email will go to 3 people, and we will be communicating right away on how to proceed. May I just mention also, I'd like to thank, it really took a team to get this implemented. I'd like to thank finance, purchasing, IT, city manager's office, my office, who am I missing? Just, I really appreciate the team effort in getting this implemented and the support that we've received. And that concludes my report.
Do you have any questions? One more question. So you get the report at the audit committee. Am I correct on that, or is it going elsewhere?
When you say the report.
I didn't mean the report, the complaint.
Right, so the complaint, an email will be sent to myself, Mike Jansen, and Jeff Dorkak. And
That's it?
that's it.
Okay.
And so it's limited to those 3 individuals, and yes, it's going to be important to keep that confidential.
Thank you. This item is a report only, and no motion is required. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Agenda item number 7, discussion for possible action regarding audit of public safety deputy city marshals administration services evidence unit. Joe Thornberry, senior forensic auditor, will be discussing this audit. Please go ahead, Mr. Thornberry.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Good morning. This is Joe Thornberry, Senior Forensic Auditor, here to discuss the City of Las Vegas Department of Public Safety's Law Enforcement Deputy City Marshals Administrative Services Evidence Unit Audit. The DPS Evidence Unit plays a critical role in managing the department's evidence, including high-risk items such as drugs, weapons, and currency. The unit oversees processes from the from initial intake, secure storage, and eventual disposal or return, ensuring all evidence is adequately documented, securely stored, managed, disposed, and returned in accordance with legal and department procedures. Staffed by a team of 3, 1 supervisor, law enforcement sergeant, and 2 civilian evidence technicians. The unit is responsible for intake, storage, and disposal obtained during DPS's law enforcement operations. The team's efforts are important in maintaining accurate records and secure handling procedures, chain of custody, which are essential for supporting the investigations and legal proceedings. Our audit assessed the effectiveness of the unit's internal controls. It provided independent assurance that the unit complies with DPS policy and legal requirements, and compared DPS policy to CALEA, the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies' national best practice standards. The 4 objectives of this audit were to evaluate internal controls over intake, storage, and disposal return of evidence within the custody of DPS Evidence Unit, evaluate the adequacy of physical security measures, safeguarding evidence at the evidence unit, evaluate controls and integrity of data within DPS's electronic case management system, P1, hereafter referred to as P1, determine the implementation of a 2018 Center for Public Safety Management, CPSM, external consultant study, of which 19 recommendations for improvements were made related to the DPS Evidence Unit. Our on-site inspection of nearly 300 evidence items confirmed that the DPS Evidence Unit established effective internal controls for intake, storage, and disposal of evidence. All inspected packaging for evidence items were in good condition with no signs of tampering or damage. Each item had a completed evidence label that matched the data shown in the electronic case management system, was properly sealed with security tape, and bore the initials of the collecting deputy marshal. The evidence storage areas were well maintained and secured with physical access control measures in place, including electronic and physical locks, alarm systems, 24/7 CCTV surveillance. Entry and exit logs were being used and were up to date. 100% of the evidence items physically inspected were compliant with DPS policy. Additionally, data contained within the electronic case management system matched the physical data on each of the evidence packaging labels, and all evidence locations were properly identified, matching their stored physical locations as shown electronically. Our audit identified 2 areas concerning where there were some opportunities. The first had to do with administrative user accounts within the electronic case management system. Additionally, our audit reviewed DPS's progress on prior recommendations made by the 2018 CPSM external consultant related to its evidence unit. Regarding P1 system access controls, our audit revealed that several generic user administrative accounts and some individuals who no longer needed access, no longer required access to the evidence case management system were present within the system. We recommended that DPS management remove these accounts and establish procedures for periodically reviewing access permissions. These measures ensure that access controls are managed effectively, safeguarding sensitive information and limiting access to authorized personnel. Regarding DPS's implementation of CPSM recommendations, we assessed DPS's compliance with CPSM consultant's report. Regarding the evidence unit, the audit confirmed that the 19 recommendations that were made under this external audit had been 100% addressed. Where direct implementation was not feasible, DPS developed alternative solutions that achieved the same goal. For our recommendations based upon the two audit findings, our team provided DPS with the following recommendations. Terminate unnecessary access. DPS management should revoke access to their evidence management system for individuals who no longer have justified business need. This recommendation was fully implemented as of August 30th, 2024. The second recommendation, implement access review procedures. DPS management should establish procedures periodically to review the appropriateness of individuals accessing the evidence record management system. DPS management has acknowledged this recommendation with a detailed response included in your management section, to which that will be completed at the end of Q1 2025. This concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Chief Potts and the public safety team is present. I'd like to invite Chief Potts up for a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Thornberry. Are there any questions from the members? None. Seeing none, well, we're all very excited about this report, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jason Potts for the record. I just want to say I'm very pleased and very proud of our staff for this, 100% compliance. This is a vulnerability for any law enforcement leader. When we look at the big three, drugs, money, and guns, especially to be 100% compliance, it's a zero-sum game. Our folks did it, and so they're in the audience as well, our leadership team and our sergeant. So phenomenal job, and it's always a concern for any police leader. So just want to express that. So thank you for your support.
Well, thank you so much. Proud of all of you. May I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Please post. Motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item number 8, discussion for possible action regarding audit of public safety detention services, inmate commissionary contract. Joe Thornberry, Senior Forensic Auditor, will be discussing this audit. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Joe Thornberry, Senior Forensic Auditor for the record, and I will present the audit of DPS Detention Services Inmate Commissary Contract with Keith Commissary Networks, LLC. The City of Las Vegas entered into its current contract with Keith Commissary Networks, LLC, who I'll refer to as vendor moving forward, on September 20th, 2017, to provide commissary services to inmates at the city jail. Through these services, inmates can purchase food, hygiene products, and other approved retail items using self-service kiosks within the jail housing units, common areas. The vendor installs and maintains the kiosk, manages inmate orders, and processes the related financial transactions. This contract is overseen and administered by DPS's Detention Services Division and Administrative Section staff. As of June 28, 2024, the vendor provides services for an average daily inmate population of approximately 485 inmates. Each week, the vendor receives an average of 95 orders, totaling $3,315. From January 1st through June 30th of 2024, there are approximately $156,350 in total commissary sales orders. The objectives of this audit were twofold. One, assess compliance with the contract terms by the city and the vendor, assess the adequacy of operational and administrative controls over the inmate commissary services. Our audit examined the city's and vendors' performance on key contract deliverables, confirming their compliance with the reliability in several critical areas. First, focusing on service delivery. The vendor is responsible for providing weekly deliveries of commissary items, including food-related products, to inmates. Our audit confirmed that these deliveries are consistently on time, reliable, and meeting contractual requirements. Monthly reporting and payments. The vendor submits monthly reports detailing all inmate commissary purchases and receives corresponding payments from the city's inmate trust account. The audit verified that these reports and payments were accurate and submitted on time, ensuring compliance with contract terms. Service fee. The city earns 32% service fee on adjusted gross sales, calculated as gross sales minus non-commission items. Our audit confirmed that these service fees are correctly calculated and paid through statement credits, reflecting proper adherence to financial terms. Signing bonus. As part of the initial contract, the vendor paid a city a one-time signing bonus of $20,000 within 30 days of signing. The audit verified that this payment was received, fulfilling the contract obligation. During our audit, we identified two findings: contract management and price review. Public safety had areas of opportunity in documenting procedures for monitoring contract deliverables to include price changes requests submitted to the city from the vendor. We found that price change acceptance or denial was being made on an ad hoc basis without established criteria. And two, the current policy for inmate commissary services, COR 6391, last revised January 2005, is outdated and does not reflect current operations. Additionally, desk procedures used by administrative services were incomplete. Our audit emphasized the importance of updating these policies and procedures to align with current practices and operational need, ensuring they are comprehensive and reflect today's requirements. Based on the findings, we provided DPS with 4 recommendations, with the first 2 focusing on improvements needed in contract compliance monitoring. Recommendation 1.1, contract compliance monitoring. Public safety management should develop and implement formal procedures for monitoring compliance with the current contract provisions. This includes tracking deliverables and maintaining a comprehensive contract performance file. Item 1.2, price change review and approval procedures. Public safety management should establish procedures for reviewing and approving commissary items, prices set by the vendor. Special attention should be paid to price increases that significantly exceed local market rates for similar liked items. Any rejected price changes should be documented and the reasons behind those discussed with the vendor to maintain transparency and control over the pricing decisions. The last 2 recommendations relate to our second finding, improvements needed in policies and procedures. These 2 recommendations are 2.1, public safety management should update and document policies to reflect current inmate commissary operations, and 2.2, public safety management should create documented desk procedures and specific task routines outlining the roles and responsibilities of administrative service office staff in administering the inmate commissary contract operations. On a final note, it should be noted that as of today, the city and the vendor are in contract negotiations, with the information contained in this audit shared with City of Las Vegas Legal and our purchasing department. It is anticipated that a final contract to renew service terms with this vendor will reoccur in coming weeks. That concludes my report. I will once again invite Chief Potts up to the stage.
Thank you, Mr. Thornberry. Are there any questions from the members? Councilwoman, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Thornberry, what does the city do with the 32% service fees? My math, that's about $50,000 per year. Does it go back to the jail? Chief?
Yes, ma'am. For the record, Jason Potts, Chief Department of Public Safety. That's per NRS. It goes back into the inmate trust fund. And so we have Kitty Warwick here that manages that for us. And that's all the stuff to do with the inmate trust fund. It's very regulated. Only things that benefit the inmates are we allowed to use that money for. We have approximately $2 million in that inmate trust fund that we actually use to again, better our inmates. And, you know, our mantra at our detention center is leaving them better than we found them. And these are some of the opportunities that we have.
I'm glad it's reinvested in the place that it was taken from, so
Yes.
thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right, may I have thank you both very much. May I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
There's a motion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Please post. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and once again, great job to the public safety team for your support and all your hard work. Thank you.
Likewise, thank you very much.
Agenda item number 9 is an abeyance item, discussion for possible action regarding audit of Innovation and Technology Department hardware asset controls. Louis Halad, Senior IT Auditor, will be discussing this audit. Go ahead, Mr. Halad.
Good morning, thank you. Louis Halad, Senior IT Auditor. In our last meeting in July, I presented to you the reports of our audit of the IT hardware asset controls, which I'd like to briefly summarize here. We had two objectives. They're not shown on these slides, but we had two objectives for this audit: to determine whether IT is appropriately verifying the location and status of its controlled hardware assets, and to determine whether IT's controlled asset reports to finance are accurate and complete. Our fieldwork uncovered 3 findings, which you see on this slide. These uncovered issues with IT's identification of their controlled assets, their documented procedures for verifying those controlled assets, and the reporting of those controlled assets to finance. To address these findings, we have made 7 recommendations to the IT department, to IT department management, which are paraphrased here on this slide. We asked them to identify which of their assets are controlled, to document their criteria for considering which assets they consider to be controlled, how they'll verify these assets exist, to implement the verification procedures that they have documented, and to revamp the reporting process to finance, making sure that both departments' lists remain in sync. The estimated completion dates that you see on this slide were provided by IT. They're found in the back of that report that we discussed last week. And we will be following up on each of these recommendations as IT reports to us that they have been completed in full. Now, during the last meeting, when we went over this, there was much discussion about our third finding, inadequate reporting of the controlled assets to the finance department. One of the things that we detailed in this part of the report was that in 2023, finance provided to IT a list of the 261 fixed assets that are under IT's purview and asked IT to confirm whether the items were still in inventory. In its response, IT reported that 172 of the assets were either confirmed to be in their inventory or had been properly retired through disposal, donation, or auction. For the remaining 89 fixed assets, IT responded that there was no record of these items in the asset management system. This represents 34% of the total items and a total capitalized cost from finance's standpoint of $2 million. During that discussion in the last meeting, Michael Sherwood, the IT director, represented that all 89 assets had been accounted for by IT and that he would work with our office to confirm their existence. Which I was then tasked to go confirm the existence of those 89 assets. So on the next slide, you'll see a chart that summarizes these verification activities since that July meeting. And I want to walk through this chart with you. Okay, we first received a report from IT on September 10th, where they indicated that 70 of the assets, we're looking at this first shaded column here, 70 of the assets were confirmed to be in hand. 15 of them had been disposed via donation, sale, or auction. 2 of them were items that they did not believe belonged on the IT hardware list, and 2 items they were still researching. My team worked with IT to verify these records over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and I've included in these first few shaded columns some snapshots of the counts as they shifted during our verification activities. Some items were found in a different location than what was listed in ServiceNow. Some that were thought to be in inventory couldn't be found. Some that were initially reported as retired were later found to be in inventory. So these numbers moved around as we were going through this activity. In the end, we were able to verify the following. Looking at this last shaded column in the middle there, it starts with 71. 71 assets were located in inventory. I saw 62 of these physically with my own eyes, and I worked with IT to verify 9 of them electronically to my satisfaction. Skipping down a couple lines, there were 4 assets that did not belong in this list. One of them was a mobile generator that belonged to a different department, and 3 of them were purely software assets with no associated hardware devices. The remaining 14 assets are being reported as retired by IT. Of the 14, IT was able to produce proper disposal documentation for 4 of them, and the remaining 10 could not be located and do not have adequate disposal records. They're reported by IT to be retired. And we could not find adequate disposal records according to our city's disposal policy, which dictates when something is auctioned, donated, what type of paperwork should follow it. I'd like to give some cost numbers to this before we move on from this chart. Speaking of these 10 items here that are thought to be retired, but we do not have adequate records, the original cost of these 10 items was $118,640. So $118,000 worth of original cost for these items. 9 of these 10 items are quite old, and their cost has depreciated completely. 1 item still has a current book value. That 1 item is a video recorder, and the current book value is about $7,000. So on the next slide, I've got just a brief overview of what happened during this process, some causes here. There were inadequate procedures and controls over the controlled assets, as we talked about in our audit report and discussed last week. Because of that, this led to inaccurate asset records in ServiceNow, which is their asset management system. There was a lack of due diligence by IT during the response to this finance request for a report, and all of this led to an incomplete reconciliation. There was a lack of follow-through by both the IT department and finance in making sure that this reconciliation was complete and that their records matched. That concludes my report. Just focused on those 89 assets. I'd be glad to answer any questions you have, and there are also representatives from, there's Michael Sherwood here, from IT, and also finance is here to answer your questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Go ahead.
Louis, thank you. I know you've had a busy couple weeks, but I think this just shows the importance for the audit department and following up on all these missing or lost items. But also, it seems like there was some lack of communication by third party, tech or installments, tech installments by other contractors. So hopefully moving forward, this definitely sets in precedence for keeping communication among all parties. So thank you.
Any other questions? I have a few. So, can I ask this of Ms. Halsey? What are we doing to make sure this doesn't happen again? I mean, this is the IT department. This is the place, and the finance, that we expect to have clean, good records. There's, kind of no excuse for communication. I mean, we'd like to know, and I'm sure the public wants to know that we are keeping track of things that we're spending the money on. So could you answer, what are we doing to make sure that we have clear accounting with IT and that this doesn't happen, that when we look at the next audit or as they move forward in audit, that we can see that we're accounting for everything and there are records for everything?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Susan Hultzley, CFO, for the record. So I'd like to remind the audit committee that the records that they were auditing had been brought over into a new system called ServiceNow about 3 years ago. And those records were never reconciled to finance to begin with. So there was probably things that were brought into ServiceNow that should never have been in there. And going forward, we're making sure that everything that is in ServiceNow is in finance and vice versa. Part of the issue that we have with a fixed asset that finance determines as a fixed asset is we base it upon an asset value. Sometimes they're grouped differently, and then they add installation cost. So it's just making sure that if finance capitalizes something, that then IT goes back and puts it into ServiceNow. There's usually a lag on this. They'll purchase something maybe in September, and finance doesn't book it until maybe January. They can't start working on capital assets until the books are closed. So there's always a lag. So we do have processes in place. I know that the finance department and IT are going to be working very closely on this. I'm getting nods from both of them, and just really redefining these processes. One of the things we've had some issues with in the past that internal audit called attention to was making sure that we have that documentation when we do dispose of something. And when we dispose of something, when IT looks at it, they need to make sure, oh, it's in ServiceNow, it has a fixed asset number for finance, and just letting finance know that they have that documentation so they know to take it off their books. And then they can make sure that those are in sync. And Ariana, how often does finance and IT, is it once a year that we'll reconcile this?
Ariana Rodriguez Mora, Project Accounting Manager for the record. We're actually in conversations with IT, and we're looking at sending all of the capitalizable assets to them on a monthly basis so that we can keep those lists reconciled throughout the year.
Perfect. Mr. Sherwood, as Director of IT, what are you doing to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
For the record, Michael Sherwood, Chief Innovation and Technology Officer for the City of Las Vegas. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I have a great team behind me. They're in the audience today. They're working very closely with finance. They're working with Louis, who really went out and went to fire stations and all over the city to actually find these assets. Look, we're all about best practices. We want to implement best practices. We want to follow best practices. And through our coordination with finance and the internal auditors, we're on our way to getting there. And I know over the course of, I don't know if we have the slide again, we have our review periods for the certain findings. We'll be making sure that the internal auditor as well as us will be here to report back.
Mr. Sherwood, any further questions? Okay.
As you mentioned, it looks like we have our January 2025, July 2025 deadlines that we're going to hit on reporting and reconciliation. The next audit committee meeting is like January 6th, so it will be after that. So maybe hopefully by that following meeting, we'll see those things all come to pass and moved off the agenda and on to new and great things. You guys are doing a great job. It's a difficult process reconciling fixed assets. A lot of people think it's simpler than it is, but when you start getting all the things involved that need to be allocated properly in construction, it does get kind of hairy at times. So thank you very much. Look forward to seeing that all get wrapped up in January.
And with that, do you want to make a motion?
Motion to approve?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Please post. Motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item number 10, report by staff and discussion for possible action regarding an update on the audit recommendations with the status of incomplete. Brian Smith, Acting City Auditor, will give this report. Please go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Hi, Brian Smith, Acting City Auditor. Twice a year, as you're aware, we brief the Audit Committee on all of the incomplete audit recommendations. And as you're aware, at the back of every audit report, we ask management to give us what their management action plan and their estimated date of completion, and that's found at the back of every audit report. As you're aware also, we have 3 classifications. We have an audit recommendation is identified as not due until that estimated date of completion passes. And then once that date passes and that recommendation has not been verified as being complete, then that recommendation moves to the status of incomplete. And then once we as auditors have the chance to verify that the department has adequately addressed that audit recommendation, the classification is changed to complete. Since the April 2024 Audit Oversight Committee, so 6 months ago, Finance has completed 2 audit recommendations related to cash handling procedures, and EUD has completed 14 recommendations related to payment collections at the parking front office and also special events parking. We applaud their efforts for addressing these recommendations, and we appreciate their help in doing so. We're happy to report that as of today, there is only 1 incomplete audit recommendation, and that's with our finance department. During our audits of payment collections at several community centers and an arts center, we noted that departments are needing clarification on a finance policy that states that departments are to complete periodic audits of cash handling locations. We recommended that finance provide direction to departments on how to appropriately comply with this policy. And that concludes my report. Ariana from finance is here to respond to any questions you may have about this remaining
Please introduce yourself for the record.
Ariana Rodriguez Mora, Project Accounting Manager for the record.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the members? Seeing none, may I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
There's a
I'm
motion,
sorry,
all in favor? Wait,
I apologize, Madam Chair. Nicole Garcia, Deputy City Attorney. I believe we're in item 10, it's just a report.
Review of the outstanding.
okay, well,
I apologize, I apologize.
was I correct? Okay, so let's start over. May I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
There's a motion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Please post. The motion carries. Let's move on to item number 11. Agenda item number 11, report by staff regarding current audits. Brian Smith, Acting City Auditor, will you also give a report? Please go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Hi, Brian Smith, Acting City Auditor. Our office is currently involved in the 2 audits that are shown on this slide: Community Development, the Business Licensing Compliance Unit, and also the Youth Development and Social Initiatives Department, the Batteries Included program. We also are in the planning stages of a couple audits that have not yet been announced. That concludes my report, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions from the members? Seeing none, this item is a report only and no motion is required. We will now move on to agenda item number 12, discussion regarding topics for future agenda items. Comments made during this portion of the agenda by individual members shall refer solely to proposals for future agenda items, and any discussion shall be limited to whether or not such proposed items are within the purview of the committee or whether such proposed items shall be placed on a future agenda. No discussion regarding the substance of any such proposed topic shall occur and no action shall be taken. Does anyone have suggestions regarding future agenda item topics? Seeing none, okay, we'll move on to item number 13. Agenda item number 13 is citizens' participation. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the committee. No subject may be acted upon by the committee unless that subject is on the agenda and is scheduled for action. If you wish to be heard, come forward and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion on any single subject, as well as the amount of time any single speaker is allowed, may be limited. Is there anyone wishing to be heard at this time? Seeing none, I'll close citizens' participation, and we'll move on to item number 14, adjournment. The next Audit Committee, Oversight Committee is scheduled for Monday, January 6, 2025, and with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, appreciate it.